Okay, we go to the next session. I would like now to invite Dato Sri Fong Joo Chung, all the way from Sarawak. He is going to talk with us on reflection on landmark constitution development in Sarawak and their implications on Malaysian constitution federalism.
I will be a bit different. I will speak from here because I'm not used to speaking down to the, on the audience. So I like to speak from here so I can look up and look at you rather than look down on you. All right. I actually got a lot of slides, but I can't present all this in 20 minutes. I've given my slides to the management, to the organizers who can distribute them, and you can read them in good time. I like to do off-the-cuff presentation with some notes, which I've already given to the organizers. So I will talk about the past, the present, and the future in the context of Sarawak within the Federation of Malaysia. All right? The past, the present, and the future. I would also not like to dwell too much on politics because I think we should leave politics aside and see how we can build a sustainable and prosperous future for our states, regardless of who is in power in Putrajaya. Okay, we had to look after ourselves. And we must look after ourselves in the context of what has happened in the past, what we're experiencing now, and how we can build that sustainable and prosperous future in the scenario of peace and harmony. Okay? After 60 years in Malaysia, the slogan of the Sarawak State Ruling Coalition, as Professor James has said, Sarawak first. What this means is that Sarawakian, despite of being Malaysians, do jealously guard the state rights and interests and ensure that Sarawak is not just another state in the Federation. We are trying now to move away from that slogan to a new slogan of Sarawak Maju Makmur. We are trying to build something that is sustainable, that will enable our future generation to have a good future, regardless of who is in power in Putrajaya. So I am not totally in agreement with Professor James' conclusion that we can only acquire autonomy and concession from the federal government because of political turmoil over the other side of the South China Sea. If we act along that thinking, I think we will regret it very much. And I will tell you why. That's the conclusion of my speech. Okay, there has been a lot of talk about Sarawak nationalism. Sarawak nationalism did not just occur after Malaysia or before Malaysia. Sarawak nationalism was instilled by the third Raja of Sarawak in 1941 when he outlined the 9 cardinal principles upon which he wants to govern Sarawak. And one of these is that the goal of self-government shall always be kept in mind, and the people of Sarawak shall be entrusted with the governance of themselves, and continuous effort should be made to hasten this goal by educating themselves in the obligation, responsibilities, and privileges of citizenship. Thus, he wants to pave the way for the people of Sarawak to govern themselves. And to do so, he realized that the most important thing that needs to be done is to provide education. Education is necessary to create a nucleus of people that can administer the state and provide leadership when the people of Sarawak take over the governance of the state. So, although that goal was not accomplished by him because of the intervention of World War II, the British government, when they took over the state, promoted an education system that produced educated and well-trained administrators like Mr. Sidi Monan, who was one of the product of that system, that would take over the leadership position to be prepared for the governance of the state, and also equally important, to provide a workforce to advance the economic development of the state. So by the time the Cobo Commission came to find out, to assess the wishes of the people of Sarawak in regard to whether they want to become part of the Federation of Malaysia, the Cobo Commission noted that the people of Sarawak did not want one form of colonialism, that is the British variety, to be substituted with the version from Kuala Lumpur. Sarawakians only agree to join the Federation on the strict understanding that there will be constitutional safeguards for their special rights and interests, including the right to regulate entry and residence in Sarawak by non-Sarawakians. Now, we must note that when the British agreed to grant Sabah and Sarawak independence, the British government never transferred sovereignty over the two states to the Federation or to the federal government. In the Malaysian Agreement is annexed the Constitution of Singapore, Sarawak, and North Borneo. Those were called constitutional instruments. Those constitutions had to be passed by the Queen before Malaysia Day or when the Malaysia Agreement came into force. In those instruments, it is specifically, and in the Malaysia Act, passed by the British Parliament in 1963. The British make it clear that they transfer the right of governance, the sovereignty of the two states, the rights, liabilities, and property belonging to the British Crown in Sabah and Sarawak to the government of Sarawak, not to the government of the Federation. So, when the House of Commons passed the Malaysia Act to grant independence to the colonies of North Borneo and Sarawak, they say that sovereignty will be vested in accordance with the agreement signed on the 9th of July 1963. Unlike the Federation of Malaya Act passed by the British Parliament, where they transfer sovereignty of all the Malay states to the Federation of Malaya. So that means that the federal government wanted the states of Sabah and Sarawak to retain their individuality. We were not the British rule ended without the British transferring sovereignty over Sabah and Sarawak to the federal government. So, before Malaysia Day, it was left to the elected government of the two states. And on the 22nd of July, 1963, Sarawak did have an elected government to decide on the terms of entry into the federation and how federal-state relationship should be governed. So we will continue to be different from the Malayan states. So we cannot be treated in the same manner as any of the states of Malaya. That is the starting point. Okay? That is the starting point. For those of you who are interested, you can read, I think, Article 44 and 45 of the Sarawak State Constitution on this point. Okay? At the time when Malaysia was formed, we placed great importance on education and the use of English as the official language because we want to safeguard our progress and to preserve a strong, effective government administration that the British has bequeathed. Okay. What happened was, in 1963, when Malaysia was formed, they did not take away our rights to education in total. Our Education Act, the Sarawak Education Ordinance, which was passed by the British colonial government to conduct or install an education system in Sarawak, continues. From 1963 until 1976, the Sarawak state government set the syllabus and curriculum for the schools in Sarawak. In 1976, they decided to extend the Federal Education Act to Sarawak and make the school system in Sarawak part of the national education system. And for that, I think many thought it was a regressive step because at that point in time, up to 1976, we in Sarawak had an education system which we can safely say was almost second to none, and we produced good people, well-trained people, and people who are capable of taking up government position in politics and contribute towards the manpower requirements of the state. All right. So, what happened? What are the significant events that happened after 1963? One was the proclamation of emergency at the time when there was some federal misunderstanding or distrust of the Sarawak government headed by Stephen Kalong-Lingkan. There were some issues, and they proclaimed an emergency in order to amend the state constitution for him to be removed. And that shocked a lot of Sarawakians that even their constitution, which was not passed by the state legislature, but according to the Malaysian agreement, by the British government to us. If you ask even your legislature, when did your state legislature pass the Sabah state constitution? You will find it not in your Hansard. You will find it in the British Gazette or as an appendix to the Malaysia Agreement. So if that is something that the British wants us to have to protect us, now after Malaysia Day, by a proclamation of emergency, something like this, like the amendment to that document, not by the state legislature, by an act of parliament, can be permitted. Okay, something is not right. So that gives rise to the second phase of Sarawak nationalism, where, as my good friend Sidi Munan will remember, the cry of Sarawak for Sarawakian. He was then a political secretary to the federal minister. All right? So that was the start of it. The second part was an attempt to take over the oil and gas resources of Sarawak. They passed two acts of parliament. The Continental Shelf Act, 1966, and the Petroleum Mining Act, 1966. The effect is that all the mineral resources found in the continental shelf belongs to the federal government, and under the Petroleum Mining Act, they will decide who should be the one to exploit it and where the revenue should go to. All right? But they find that they could not apply those two acts to Sabah and Sarawak. They only applied it to Peninsular Malaysia. Why they could not apply to Sabah and Sarawak? Because in 1954, the Queen in Council make a declaration, an order called the Sarawak, in the case of Sabah, Alteration of Boundaries Order, 1954, to extend the boundaries of Sabah and Sarawak, to cover the seabed and subsoil of that area known as the continental shelf beneath the high seas, and regardless of the character of the high seas, to be part of the territory of Sabah and Sarawak. And those land, which forms the continental shelf, are under our respective state laws, state land. So they cannot issue mining leases over state land because under the Constitution, the issue of mining leases and all that over land can only be done by the state. So they cannot extend the two acts over. And they know that there are rich oil and gas reserves, both offshore Sabah and Sarawak. So how did they do it? In 1969, there was a proclamation of emergency because of the May 13 riot, which has nothing to do with Sabah and Sarawak. There were no riots, but the proclamation covered the whole of Malaysia. And pursuant to that proclamation, they promulgate an ordinance called the Emergency Essential Powers Ordinance Number 10 to extend the Continental Shelf Act and the Petroleum Mining Act to Sabah and Sarawak, which they cannot do, in normal times, where there is no emergency. And to compound the takeover, to complete the takeover, they passed the Petroleum Mining Act, the Petroleum Development Act, 1974, to vest all the petroleum resources on Petronas in exchange for oil cash payment of 5% of FOB value from the sale of the petroleum. No provision was made whether that 5% can be reviewed or increased. And, later on, there were requests for auditing They just say, look, these are our invoices, you know, and that's what you get. All right? That led to a lot of dissatisfaction. But one thing they omitted to do when they passed the act is that while they vest the petroleum resources in Petronas, they did not vest the land. So that land remains state land. Today, we are telling them that when they finish the petroleum exploration or production, they must return, decommission, and return the site to us so that we can do something else with the land, like using us for carbon storage. Okay? So that is what is happening. All right? I will deal with in the later part about the reclaiming oil and gas rights. So all this shows the centralization of power that has been happening, and it got worse, of course, when Mahathir came in, because Mahathir is a centralist. He doesn't care very much about the state government. I have some encounters with him, and I know that. Yeah? But the 1969 proclamation, now also in 1976, they amended Article 1(2) of the Federal Constitution, right, to describe Malaysia as comprising the following states from Perlis to Sabah. So we were not described as part of the Borneo states. Of course, there have been a lot of unhappiness. And then during Mahathir's second premiership, there was discussion to restore the position of Article 1(2) to its original form, together with redefining the meaning of federation, because they say federation means the federation constituted under the Federation of Malaya Agreement, 1957. You know, we wanted to change it and all that. So during the time when Dato V.K. Liu was the minister in charge of law, there was an attempt to amend the constitution, just one amendment to describe to say the federation shall comply of the states of Malaya and the Borneo states. We in Sarawak did not agree to that, because whatever you describe yourself, whether you want to say Sarawak or Sabah is a super state, a region, or a nuclear power, whatever you want to say, if you don't have one basic thing, you don't have the financial resources to manage yourself. And whatever you want, you have to go to federal government and ask for money. Even you want to build a bridge, you have no money, you have to go there and ask for development allocation. That is not going to help. Your status is irrelevant if you don't have a degree of financial autonomy. That was what we were fighting for. So we objected to it, and that failed. And then came the second amendment in 2022. So that was the explanation why we did not agree to the first amendment, because it was purely cosmetic. It doesn't help anyway. I pleaded with the then Attorney General and with the Minister, but they say that they will want to do this first and the rest later on. So we wanted everything to be done at the same time, and we wanted some issues to be discussed. Okay? So in 2011, Parliament announced the 1969 Proclamation of Emergency. For a long time, people have been asking, even in Parliament, why the 1969 Proclamation of Emergency was not lifted. Lim Kit Siang says there were no tanks in the street. Why is there still an emergency? Nobody wants to reply to that. But the real reason why was that under the Proclamation of Emergency, many laws were made which the government wants to keep, federal government wants to keep in place. One of which is Ordinance number 10. They want to retain that ordinance so that they can apply the Continental Shelf Act to Sabah and Sarawak and the Petroleum Mining Act to support the PDA. So when they remove or announce the proclamation by both houses of Parliament, by virtue of Article 150, Clause 7, Ordinance number 10 lapsed after 6 months from the announcement of the proclamation. So we are free after 2012 to ask for the petroleum resources to come back to us, or at least we should be entitled to a greater share of the revenue and future interests to be derived from the exploitation or development of the petroleum resources. So when Tan Sri Adinan took over as Chief Minister in 2013, he started the ball rolling and demanded that all rights and safeguards that were promised under the Malaysian Agreement must be restored because there was some erosion on the way, and a greater share of revenue from oil and gas. All right? At first, in response to that, the then Prime Minister Najib says, look, we will do all these things administratively, which we didn't agree. So we started the process of getting the federal government to form a cabinet committee to look into that. And we started a negotiation with Petronas to work up a greater share of the revenue. Some politicians were asking for 20% cash payment, which Petronas say they can't afford. So the state stepped in and imposed the state sales tax, which Sabah followed, so as to increase our revenue share. As a result, the state revenue has increased from 5.17 billion in 2015 to 11.35 billion forecast for this year, more than double. We regained our onshore mining rights, and today, or since October last month, we have started drilling for oil in Miri onshore. Onshore oil production in Sarawak stops in the 70s. So that has been restored. And through our own state oil and gas company, Petros, we have acquired substantial interest and equity in offshore production fields. Today, Petros is the third largest oil company in Malaysia, with 100,000 barrels of oil or oil equivalent produced per day, and a revenue forecast for this year of 4 billion. So we are getting somewhere. So we have regained some measure of financial autonomy to enable us to provide or extend water and electricity supply to rural areas, and we are now going to fund our own international schools. You know, if you look at the Education Act, They declare that international schools are not part of the national school system. So anybody can set up international schools. So the state is going to set up 6. We have already 1 running and another one next year. And annually, the state may spend about 100 million to run these schools. And these schools are open, especially to those of the low income group. There will be students will receive free education. We had private international schools, but we find that these private international schools, one of which I'm running, we cater for some people with a higher income. So our state international schools will cater for the low income group, and especially for the Bumiputras. The reason why we are doing this is we do not believe that the education system that we have can provide for us a workforce that we need in order to accelerate our development. Because if we rely on the current education system, and you look at the schedule to the Education Act on the core subjects that must be taught, you will find that we may have people that are very good in terms of having moral education, but they will be not able to accept or work in the challenging world where science and technologies are required.
Dato, sorry to interrupt you, but can we talk about this at the plenary session?
Yeah, can I just make 2 points?
Thank you.
Okay. We are also trying to recover. I will talk about health and education later, that we want them to give us back to us, but within the framework of the Constitution, constitutional provision. The state is now credit rating, the same as Malaysia's sovereign rating. And then I want to emphasize the point that we cannot say that we want to have and defend our autonomy on the basis that there is political instability over the other side. We must be able to secure our own future, regardless of what happened over the other side. We must exert whatever rights that there is within that Constitution. We must be able to have an educated, enlightened society to move us forward and help us to defend those rights. And above all, let's put politics to the back seat. Work towards creating for ourselves and for our future generation a sustainable and prosperous future. And at the same time, we can only achieve this if we practice good governance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.